This is Daoism with Ian Felton. If you want more psychological ease, this show helps you build it slowly and sanely. I'm Ian Felton, a psychotherapist and Taoist practitioner. To better follow along, you can go to ianfelton.com. Under podcast, you'll find a post for today's episode, which is episode 1. There's also a post with links to the translations I reference and a post that contains a PDF of the Chinese version that I'll be reading from. To begin with, let's start with a grounding and slowing moment to put us in the space that can help us just explore Taoism a little bit more. And so let's just take a moment to arrive. If it's comfortable, just kind of soften your eyes or gently close your eyes. Feel the contact points of your body. If your feet are on the ground, feel that. Feel if your seat is supporting you. And check your spine and just see if it's upright and holding you well. You can let your shoulders drop, and you can just unclench any tension in your face. Soften your stomach and just take a deep breath. And just notice how you're breathing. No need to change it. Just follow a natural rhythm in and out, just like a river finding its path. On your next exhale, you can release any tension that you're noticing. On your next inhale, see if you can find more ease. And we'll just take 3 easy breaths together. Inhale, finding more presence. Exhale, softening. Inhale, grounding ourselves in our body. And exhale, settling. Inhale, allowing the moment to happen. And exhale, letting go. And just sense the whole body as one field of awareness with nothing to fix, nothing to go after. Just being with what is in the moment. And just find yourself letting your attention rest in a simple, natural flow. Thank you. And now we're going to look at our first episode today, which is Chapter 1 of Daodejing. If you're not familiar with Daodejing, it is the foundation of Daoism, and it was written long time ago, centuries before Jesus. It certainly started as an oral tradition that was eventually written down. When it was written down, technology was still very basic. Some of the oldest versions of Daodejing were found on bamboo slips, just kind of scrawled into some bamboo. That's how old it is. Old. And it's attributed to someone called Lao Tzu, which we know now is not the case. There may have been someone called Lao Tzu, but it really means kind of like wise old person, and it was sort of a honorary name given to Daodejing as the author, even though really what we're talking about is wisdom from a time that is so drastically different than our present time. And that's why we study it. We study how people experienced life, and not just sort of the day-to-day experience of life, but the deep reflection of people who were considered wise and insightful. And they certainly had a completely different way of experiencing life. And that's why we explore it, because today we have a very interesting way of seeing the world, our culture, our Western way of seeing things. It's drastically different. And we take it for granted that the way that we've been programmed to see the world is how the world actually is. And I think the more that you reflect on Daoism, or really any kind of non-Western indigenous way of looking at things, you'll see that the Western way of seeing things is just programming, and there's other ways of experiencing life and ourselves and those around us. So that's why we study Daodejing. It's a source of being and understanding that we simply don't have access to without really making space to try to understand it. I've been studying Daodejing for a very, very long time. When I first read, actually, this version of Daodejing was given to me by a girlfriend in college, and I had already started studying it. And it's been close to me for decades, and I seriously started studying it probably 10 years ago. I started studying Chinese in 2013 because I really wanted to understand Daodejing and Chinese language, not just the way that it's been translated. And so I've spent quite a bit of time studying it. I did a podcast with my friend David for a few years. We studied Daoism together. I've spent many, many hours thinking about Daoism, and my understanding is always deepening and changing. That's the great thing about Daoism, which we'll see in this very first chapter. There's never some moment of understanding where you discover it and find it, and that's the end of it. No, Daoism is an unfolding and an unfolding and another unfolding of deeper and deeper understanding and mysteries, and there's no end to it. So to try to say this is Daoism would be confusion, or to say that isn't, that's also would be a lack of understanding of Daoism. So what we really do here, we explore. We don't say, this is correct, this is not correct. I might introduce some critiques, if you will, of some translations, not as a way of invalidating them, but as a way of saying, maybe if you only look at it this way, you close yourself off to some other types of understanding. Everything's contextual. Everything can make sense in a certain way. So there's always an it depends with anything that we say here. So what I'm going to do now, instead of just continuing to kind of expound on the foundation of Daoism, is just kind of jump into some of the text. Today we're going to focus on chapter 1. So what I like to do is I have 4 versions of Daodejing that I'm going to be referencing. If you go to the ianfelton.com podcast, you'll see a post just on the translations. There's links to each translation that I'm going to reference. So if you want your own copy, that's a great way of finding the copies that I'm using. And I'll explain why I'm using each one as we get into it. But what I have done is I've done my own translation of Daodejing, one that is kind of a stricter interpretation where I'm really trying to stay very close to the Chinese language and not kind of bend it to Western words, English words or phrases, and just trying to use the best approximation of an English word in place of a Chinese character. And that stricter translation can sometimes, what I feel is that when it's been translated into another language, take some of the poetry out of it. And so then I do another translation where I still want to stay very close to what I feel is the original meaning, but allow myself the flexibility of using a bit more poetic license to try to express what I believe is there in the original Chinese. So I'm going to read those. I'm going to read from some other translations. And really, we're just going to look at different lenses. Daodejing can't be pinned down. It's not that one translation is right, another one is wrong. We're just looking at things through different lenses. But there are some fundamental things that if we don't understand them, we're going to kind of miss the boat and kind of be stuck in this Western, modern, contemporary way of looking at life. And that's not going to get us anywhere because I think most of us can see it's a dead end, that this sort of the current philosophy of what life is that's dominated in things like politics and the economy and our society, it's not getting us anywhere. It is a dead end. It's not working anymore. So maybe we can uncover something important. So let me first read the version of Daodejing that I've translated with a lot of focus on the poetry of it. So I translated this actually from my stricter translation, which I'll read later, only because I think that the poetic translation brings it to life a little more. So here it goes. Chapter 1 of Daodejing. The way we speak of is not the way itself. The names we give will never capture it. The nameless is the beginning of everything. The named gives shape to all manifestations. Let go of desire to see its subtle creativity. Hold on to desire to see its contours and edges. The creative field and manifestations arise together, but we reference them apart. Together, they are called numinous darkness. Depths upon depths of mystery, the gateway to every wonder. So that's my translation of chapter 1 after first doing a very strict translation from the Chinese. So the first thing I'm going to do before getting into the stricter translation, we are going to unpack this first chapter. I just first wanted that kind of poetic translation to sit with us a little bit and just kind of taste it. So this is what chapter one sounds like if we were reading it in Chinese. So I'm reading from this particular version that I'm reading comes from Wang Bi. This is a good time to explain. Daodejing has been uncovered from different archaeological sites. The oldest one goes back to, like, I think the 3rd or 4th century BC, and it's called the Guadian bamboo slips version. It was discovered in a tomb. It was fragmentary, so it wasn't a whole package. It wasn't all 81 chapters. Ma Wang Di is another one that was found in the 2nd century BC, and a lot of the translations that I'm going to reference use that one because it's closer to, it's complete and it's closer to that ancient Chinese worldview. So the glossing and interpretation that comes in a later version of Daodejing called the Wang Bi. Wang Bi, he was a young guy when he kind of editorialized Daodejing, kind of tried to correct it and kind of really give it a cohesive feel, because we do believe all of this wisdom is sort of an aggregate from many thinkers and people, and not just someone called Lao Tzu. So I'm going to read from the Wang Bi because it does kind of read well in Chinese, and Wang Bi did do a very nice job of putting the chapters in order and kind of making it a nice, clean package for us. So that's the one that I'm reading from right now. So, chapter 1. Dao 可道，非常道；名可名，非常名。吾名，天地之始；有名，万物之母。故常无，欲以观其妙；常有，欲以观其教。此两者，同出而异名，同谓之玄。玄之又玄，众妙之门。So you can hear it's very poetic. It's terse, compact, rhythmic. It's very difficult to maintain a strict translation of Chinese and keep that rhythm and musical aspect to it. And there's very much like a couplet feel to Daodejing, because there's tons of contrast that happens, because again, Daoism isn't about making things concrete. It's about comparison, contrast, things in context, relationships between things. Really, that's fundamentally what it is the universe as a holographic representation where everything contains the universe within it. We can unpack that sometime. So that's the Chinese reading of it. And so now what I'm going to do is hop over to kind of my stricter translation of that, where I'm really trying to translate each character by character as well as I can without making interpretive leaps and really just sticking to those original Chinese characters. On the resources page, you'll find a dictionary in the post for today that has the definition of each character. So you can go in and look at each character and see what those meanings are. And, you can use it as a launch pad for your own research. So here's my stricter translation. The Tao that can be spoken is not the constant Tao. The name that can be named is not the constant name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Thus, in constancy without desire, its subtleties are observed. In constancy with desire, its contours are observed. These two emerge together, yet bear different names. Together, they are called the deep. Depth upon depth, the gateway to countless wonders. So I still really like this translation, but it feels, to me, it feels a little stiff and odd in English, even though this translation is very close to what's written in Chinese. And so what we can do is kind of explore some other versions, some other translations to try to make sense of why these lines can vary so much from translation to translation. So let's start with, I'm going to pull up the Victor H. Mayer version, and we're going to look at it. So this particular translation, again, tried to do a strict language translation rooted in the context when these words were written. So the Warring States period in China, 6th to 4th century AD, very chaotic, lots of different states that made up China that were all vying for power, and just a very chaotic, troublesome time to be living in China. And this translation really tries to take on the mindset of the people at that time and use a translation that sticks very strictly close to the translation like mine, but it does come out differently. So here's what this one sounds like. The ways that can be walked are not the eternal way. The names that can be named are not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of the myriad creatures. The named is the mother of the myriad creatures. Therefore, always be without desire in order to observe its wondrous subtleties. Always have desire so that you may observe its manifestations. We're going to zoom in on that. Both of these derive from the same source. They have different names, but the same designation. Mystery of mysteries, the gate of all wonders. So you're starting to see there's quite a bit of variation amongst translations, but there's still this sense that's arising, this kind of intuitive message that's coming up. I'm going to now open up the Ames and Hall translation, and what they tried to do was really deconstruct Daoism from a philosophical standpoint. So really leaning into a cohesive, coherent philosophy, still translating Daodejing based upon an understanding of the words in that time, but making choices to make the philosophical concepts clearer. And this is how they translated Chapter 1. Waymaking that can be put into words is not really waymaking. And naming that can assign fixed reference to things is not really naming. The nameless is the fetal beginnings of everything that is happening, while that which is named is their mother. Thus, to be really objectless in one's desires is how one observes the mysteries of all things, while really having desires is how one observes their boundaries. These two, the nameless and what is named, emerge from the same source, yet are referred to differently. Together they are called obscure, the obscurest of the obscure. They are the swinging gateway of the manifold mysteries. So quite different words still, but yet we're still finding something happening. There's something that's coming up. So now let's really start looking at these different concepts, because this chapter sort of lays the framework for everything that comes in the book. I mean, this is sort of the kind of root metaphor for everything that comes. So let's look at this first couplet about waymaking that can be put into words is not really waymaking. I'm really going to use the Hall and Ames version for explicating the concepts, because my view is that philosophically they have done the best job of striking the balance between fidelity to the Chinese characters while still really trying to deconstruct all of the Western interpretation and filtering that has been done to Daoism, and have really turned it in, to something very far away from the original, that Taoism sometimes has been kind of morphed into a new age spirituality, which it is not, or it's been ascribed sort of a transcendent qualities, which does not actually exist in essence. So I'm going to use the Hall and Ames version because their philosophical stance, I believe, is most accurate and has done the best job of deconstructing all of the Western appendages that have been placed upon it for no good reason. So, waymaking. So, Tao, they're translating Tao as waymaking, the way. You've heard Taoism called the way. And really, what we're looking at in this first chapter is that there's sort of this bifocal nature of Tao, where there's this field, like a quantum field, if you will. I mean, Taoism, there's a book called The Tao of Physics that basically shows how much quantum physics has proven a lot of the essence of Daodejing, that there's sort of this field of infinite wonders that doesn't really exist, if you will, and that all events arise out of this creative field. And rather than a moral interpretation of these middle lines about desire, I'm going to read the Stephen Mitchell version here in a little bit, and this is where I'm going to kind of critique his translation, because I think there is a misinterpretation in his first chapter, which means a lot. But it's not that desire is good or bad. What it's saying is, if we just open up without any agenda or any plan or critiquing or anything, and just observe, we can see Tao subtleties and nuances, how there's just a flow to life and it's constantly changing, and how everything is relating to each other thing. The sun, how it casts shadows and light plays with objects, and the experiencer is witnessing all this from its own unique perspective, and any other organisms in that same place are experiencing it from their unique perspective, and that there's all of these subtleties and mysteries that abound in every moment. But also, if we fill ourselves with desire, with an objective, that's when things become more concrete. We can see the shape and the form, and the way that we need to see things to navigate life in a particular context. So, we have work to do, we have a project that we have to complete, etc. These are not moral judgments about desire. It's a psychological state that we can switch between field and focus to experience Tao differently. So, just to give you a taste of why I think that's important, if we go to the Mitchell reading, which it's a great reading that lots of people love, but Stephen Mitchell he wasn't a student of Chinese. He didn't know how to read Chinese, and all of his source material were other translations. And so without that, I think you're kind of at a disadvantage. And he did a great job of intuitively kind of digesting a whole bunch of different translations and coming up with his own poetic version, which is like what I did with the first one. So I'm going to read it, but I'll show you where there's kind of a unfortunate perspective in his translation. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. So far, so good. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. So that's not what is in the Chinese. And this is where Hall and Ames are so important, because they really make it clear there's no moral judgment in this chapter, where Mitchell really, he gives it, this is where Western perspectives creeping in, where there's morality baked into the universe, and everything that you do has some moral implication. And no, that's not Daoism. Daoism is not a book on morality. And unfortunately, Mitchell right off the bat frames it as one. So that's a big miss, in my opinion. And again, this is a super popular translation of Daodejing that lots of people love, and there is a lot to love about it. But this is, I would not look at these lines as being a more like, caught in desire, you only see the manifestations. No, there's no caught in. It's saying desire. The original is saying desire is normal. Desire is natural. It's just another state of being. And that when we're in a state where we're actively going after our desires, food, water, shelter, love, sex, whatever, now we're interacting with forms, concrete forms. But we also have to acknowledge that's not all. That underlying this is this field of wonder, creativity, that is not moral, and it's just constant creation and destruction. So I'll finish with Mitchell's translation. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. This source is called darkness. darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. I like all that. Like those are good. So, oh, and I caught myself. Those are good. So we're not trying to say good or bad because again, if we're doing Daoism, we're not judging and using good and bad evaluations and judgments of things. So let's look at some other kind of key points in this chapter. In the original Chinese, there's a word chang, and it gets translated a lot of different ways, but constant is the word that I used when I did my strict interpretation because it's emphasizing a continuous presence and structure. Some people have used the word unchanging, and I don't like that because it feels limiting, and we don't know if Tao is changing or unchanging. We don't know if there's the roles of the universe change over time. We have no idea. We have no way of knowing. But constant, there seems to be something always there. Other people translate that word as enduring. That to me sounds a little too fragile. So, like, it's enduring, and at any moment it might endure. But constant has this real depth of, like, it's there. Another word that people translate different, there's sure. So when it's talking about in the second couplet, the nameless is the fetal beginnings of everything that is happening, while that which is named is their mother. The beginning part, that's what gets tricky because, again, it's a mystery. We don't know, is there a beginning? Is there not a beginning? The source, the origin. Those are popular choices for that word. I use beginning because it does not claim, it doesn't make a claim on is there eternity, is there not? So beginning instead of origin, it's the literal direct interpretation of the character that's used. Sure, it means beginning. So that's a choice that I've used to leave that sort of open-ended and just, it's the beginning. The nature of that beginning, we're not making a claim. So there's another word. So I use contours for when we're talking about the desiring couplet, where we're looking at the two different states of existence, with desire, without desire. When we're talking about being full of desire, I use the word contours because, again, there's kind of an ambiguity there that I like, where it doesn't make too concrete of a choice. Other people will say forms or manifestations. But what we're really talking about are what appear to be the concrete objects in our experience. And now this is where we're going to take another, this is to me the hugest thing that has to be expressed in chapter one. And everything else that I've said now is just sort of a warm up to this point, because it to me is the essence of this chapter. Tao is not transcendental. It's not a God outside of experience. It's not this being out there. That Tao is literally this moment, and it's not separate from us. It is our experience, and it's not our experience as a separate self. It's that every moment there's nothing really concrete, that it's the Western material world that suggests that there is a universe full of objects that exist out there that treats the world like natural resources to plunder, that treats people like resources to exploit for their labor, that treats everything like an object. That there's these things that I want to possess, and as a good capitalist, I can go out and possess these things because that's what the world is. It's like, it's almost this mentality of, like, for example, one time I talked to a doctor. The woman I was dating at the time was a physician, and I would go to these events, and this one happened to be in a kind of a religious part of the country, and we're having an event, and I was talking to this guy. He was a nice enough guy. I mean, having a good conversation, and Stevie Ray Vaughan comes on. I don't want to say the jukebox because I don't think Stevie Ray Vaughan comes on, and he's just sitting there and really getting into it. And he looks over at me and he says, "I can't wait to get to heaven, and Stevie Ray Vaughan's going to be playing 24 hours a day." And I just looked at him and I said, "Doesn't sound like heaven for Stevie Ray Vaughan." And that's kind of the mentality, right? This Western mentality that everything is an object for me to control, even Stevie Ray Vaughan, who, when we're talking about Tao, we're talking about the artist spirit, the way that artists experience life as a flow of relationships, us as part of a flow that is forever unfolding in a mysterious, subtle way that can't be explained with reason. That's the part where it's beyond words. It can't be put into a container or defined, even though Western philosophy and thinking wants to do that, want to put a label on everything, carve everything up so that it can be put in a box with identities, with politics, with so many things. And that isn't the nature of life. There are no things, there are no objects. There's becoming. Everything is becoming. And everything has a non-distinct nature. So, I can touch my teacup and I can be under the delusion that this is an object and I can drink the tea. But what's happening is a relationship between this body, this subjective experience, and this particular, combination of molecules. And in this moment, we can use names to name everything. I can say, this is the teacup, this is the tea. That's the part where giving things a name when an event manifests, yes, we try to use words to describe each thing, but they fall short. It's not reality. It's not how things actually are. But our Western mentality wants us to really just see things that way, to just see a wall, to just see things and even people as things, and suck all of the mystery out of it. Quantum physics, we know there's a quantum layer to everything, And constantly in every moment, there's nothing but a field of probabilities, that nothing is really solid. Matter is flashing in and out of existence, and it's all an illusion. I mean, chemistry, yes, we can say these compounds make this up, and yes, there is something to that. But underneath that, this field of quantum particles is not real. It is just a bunch of probabilities flashing in and out of existence. We know that most of the matter in the universe, we don't know what it is. It's called dark matter. So the most intelligent physicists that are out there that know what's going on to the best of their ability will admit, yes, we do not know what dark matter is. I guess cosmologists as well, people who study space. We don't know what dark matter is. We don't know how the quantum field works. It's perfectly aligned with Tao. There's nothing in Daoism that denies or competes with our most richest current understanding of both quantum physics and cosmology. Dark matter makes up most of the universe, have no idea what it is. The quantum field underpins all matter. It's not solid, it's not real, it's just probabilities. That is the mindset of a Taoist. There's this field, there are no objects, there are probabilities that arise, and we have a relationship to everything in the moment. We are not separate, we are part of this flow. Tao is in us, it's in everything around us, and we are not separate from it. We are this whole united experience. And as Daodejing progresses, we get into more nuances of how to be in this mystery in a way that gives us the most psychological ease, that gives us fulfillment, that also gives us direction and purpose, but not so purposeful as to miss the point of life or the flow of life or the miracle of life. The mystery. I'll say mystery because miracle again it implies value, and Tao Te Ching doesn't imply value. It just tries to explain this process, this mysterious process without judgment. So that's what we're going to continue to do. So a couple of practices for today. What I want to do is, after we kind of go through all this, what are some practices that you can take with you? You're going to find these on the blog post for this episode at ianfelton.com. Go to the podcast link, look for the episode 1. So you'll see a few practices, some micro practices. 2-mode attention drill. So this is for that couplet about with desire, without desire. 60 seconds without labeling anything, just breath, sound. And then take 60 seconds naming the contours, objects, roles. Notice the shift in your being when that happens. Work in relationships. Use contours when decisions require clarity, and then invite subtleties when empathy or creativity is needed. So in other words, this 2-mode way of being, we start learning to practice when to wield which. Here's a real good one. When you're driving down the freeway, you want contours. So heavy machinery, that is not the time to go into the artistic, expansive, just looking at everything as a flow of relationships. I wouldn't recommend it. I would focus on this car is there, I'm going this fast, the road is going this direction. But practice that and play around with it. Technology and social media. Algorithms are all about perverting the desire part of it. So it biases our perception toward only being in that kind of Western contour, dopamine, serotonin, give me a fix mindset of swiping and reacting and that sort of thing. And it eats away at that expansive, just open way of being in life where there's no agenda. We're not pursuing a particular outcome. We are just existing as human beings within the flow of Tao and appreciating it as artists where we don't know. We don't know anything. We don't know what the next moment holds, and to pretend otherwise is delusion. Lastly, there's the ethics of naming. So language, when we're talking about Ming, which is naming, we want to be really careful about what names we use because the names that we use are going to skew our perspective. So let's choose very carefully what names we're using. So in this practice, let's try to use gentle names. So gentle names that create more possibility, more concreteness, less morality, less judgment. So I'll leave that to you for a creative exercise. Figure out what makes sense to you. But as an example, we have relationships to each person in our family, and we might just say mother, father, sister, brother, etc. And there's a lot of meaning packed in those and our own historical baggage with what those names mean. If we wanted to change and shift our naming, we could say something like maybe I'm talking about my mother, and I could say, the being who has cooked me hundreds, if not thousands, of meals, who has kept a door open for me no matter how hard of a struggle that I'm going through, no matter how low I feel. That person changes things, right? Like there's a huge shift now. So let's practice that. Let's practice that. Let's see if we can. I mean, not all the time. Sometimes we have to be efficient and just use the words that everybody knows. But in our own practice, we can sit down and we can say that. We can try to give things names that are gentle, that show process and relationship, not concreteness. I feel like I've said enough for today. If you have any questions for me, I encourage you to email me at ian@ianfelton.com. Include if you want me to read your question and make it part of a future episode. I'm happy to do as much QA. I'm happy to make plenty of space for QA and keep doing that in future episodes. So thank you for hanging out with me, and I hope that next time we can get even deeper into Daoism. I'm your host, Ian Felton. Take care.